Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcast. In this episode, we will be talking about purpose and peaceful transformation. And I am delighted to welcome Mandar Apte, Executive Director of Cities for Peace. Mandar, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Mandar, you're a recognized thought leader in social innovation, and you've been studying, practicing, and teaching meditation for that amount of time for the International Association of Human Values and the Art of Living Foundation. You're also known for your work previously in Shell and the program that you put in place there, which has been named as a game changer. And I know you won some awards for that, the Accenture Ashoka Entrepreneurship Award and things like that. But the program was looking to go beyond CSR, beyond the boundaries, I like to say, of what we measure in organizations and business today, and look at purpose, peace, but also recalibrating what I call our inner game, to bring peace into the world, but through more purposeful and peaceful leadership. So I know that at the heart of your innovation program that you did in Shell, you were on the belief that silence is the mother of all creativity. Yeah, absolutely. And I think silence is something we're bad at as a nation and as a society, but also that each individual employee can play a role in this innovation process, just as each human, Mandar, can play a role in the peace building process, and that it's a journey and not a destination, which again doesn't fit in with ticking things off a checklist and getting things done and getting to where we want to get to if I take a sort of binary, more delivery oriented mindset. So can we start with what you started as a movement at Shell? And can you tell us about this program and why you did that?
Yeah, firstly, Susie, thanks for all the things you are doing during the pandemic. And when we met, you also shared how you are not ignoring your own family life, which is equally crucial, and
Absolutely.
your own well being and self care. So that's where I resonate with you very deeply.
Thank you.
Um, about 10 years ago, while I was in the Shell Game Changer program, I realized that. Uh, like any other company, Shell had an incubator called
Mm,
gamechanger. And like every industry, Shell's incubator was sponsoring programs, projects, ideas in the energy space.
mm,
And what I realized, two things was the first is innovation is not just a technology game.
clearly.
Most of the times it's also very social and mental. Like,
Mm,
for example, you have an idea, but you don't know how to pitch it,
yeah.
or your idea gets rejected because people don't like you, and it's
Mm,
nothing to do with the idea.
mm,
And things like failure, like, when you are trying something new, failure is associated, like it's the tail of your shadow.
yeah.
So, how do you deal with failure? None of these things are taught in engineering curriculums
No.
because we are taught how to be successful, but we
Mm,
are not taught how to deal with failure, anxiety, frustration, right? So, this
mm,
is where the socio emotional dimension comes in for innovation and entrepreneurship.
mm,
And the second thing I realized is companies like Shell, uh, because we are in the world, we are also seeing the impact of social degradation, environmental degradation on
yeah.
our own people and our own businesses.
Mm,
So, what I realized is Shell's innovation program, which is energy technology, needs to be expanded to also address the interface of society and business.
mm,
So, can we also deal with social projects, social innovations, but not philanthropic investments, not money going out,
mm,
only to create CSR value, indirect value? But can you invest in social solutions that also create business return on investment? So, direct value.
mm,
So those are the two things that I was thinking about 10 years ago. And I had a very enlightened manager, boss, friend,
mm.
philosopher, guide. Without that person, you can't do what you want to do, right? You need this air cover and this.
Absolutely. Mm,
So
yeah.
I just was lucky. He encouraged me to look at the socio emotional dimension. And that is where the Empower program is what I gave birth to within Shell, is to look at employees within the company, how everybody can become part of the innovation culture. Because innovation is not just about coming up with sexy ideas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It needs a huge ecosystem to bring that idea to the marketplace.
Yeah, and you need the social and emotional dimension to manage the
relationships. You do need the social
you?
emotional dimension, right? So, for example, when you ask in any organization, hey, what is innovation? People will say, it's not my job, it's the job of the scientist.
Yeah.
And so that is where the disconnect starts. That, okay, you may be an admin, but you should know what is innovation and how you can play a role. Right? So, for example, if you may be on a holiday in, I don't know, Beijing or Kuala Lumpur, and on that holiday, you have seen something different. Right? Maybe a competitor is doing something different in that market. You should feel empowered that, hey, I'm going to bring that to the retail organization of my company, Shell. I'm going to tell it. You have played a huge role of connecting the dots. Right? So there are many such roles that people in the organization can play. But what they need is the sense of empowerment, and that's where it begins within.
It comes from within.
So for that, you have to overcome your fear
that,
I'm just an admin. What can I do in the innovation process, right? So that you have to overcome that hurdle of firstly, what it means and how I can be involved.
And then you have to step out of your organizational identity in terms of silos, don't you? So if I'm admin, then I don't do innovation. Innovation happens in a different silo. And then, procurement happens in a different silo from innovation. And then, there's also this understanding that the definition of success, as defined by KPIs, delivery KPIs, and other things, is everybody's definition of success. So what happened in the empowerment process around how they define success, Mandar, and how they get to stepping out of essentially the way they perceive their identity in that organization?
So you are addressing two different things. What you're saying. One is the personal empowerment that, last year I tried something and it failed, but all I got was a slap on my wrist. So this year, I'm not going to try anything new because what's the point? Nobody appreciates failure here. So I'm not going to try something new this year. So that is how you make people feel constrained. And the second thought I had while you were speaking is usually we live a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde life. So we are, let's say, an engineer at the workplace, but we love to plant trees, or we do gardening in the evenings. So that is where, when you create that social impact innovation incubator, you are also asking your employee, hey, are there any ideas that you are working on in your own personal life, your passion, that seemingly has nothing to do with Shell in your day job today? But in the broader game, that passion can be leveraged in creating new value. So that is where the social incubator can invite employees to bring their passion at work. Right? That's why today this is the thinking that we know that after COVID, there is this large resignation. People are feeling disconnected, not engaged at the workplace. This is how you can actually retain your talent, by giving people opportunities to bring their passion at work.
Yeah. And I was saying, I love the word talent. I was just about to say that is about untapped potential in an organization, isn't it? And unlocking talent that isn't visible for whatever reason. Which brings me back to your first point about energy, because that will also release a lot of positive energy if I'm working on my passion.
Two words come to mind. One is unleash.
Yeah.
And the second is you will get out of your own shell.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that play on words.
Which is what happened to me. So I also had my key moment of truth while I was running this incubator program. is we were looking at the interface of various sustainable development goals and what does it have to do with the business model for Shell. So we were looking at SDG number 16, which is peace and security. And usually business doesn't play a role in that space. Right? Business says, what's in it for me? Like, I'm not responsible for it. It's the job of the UN or the police department or NGOs. Like, it's nothing to do with business. So that is where accidentally we found a business case for why a company like Shell should invest in peace building. Not only for social good, but also for the financial return.
And I'm hearing, Mandar, and I thought this as I went through your program and I read more about what you do. Is peace a mindset for you? And if it is, how can we cultivate it?
I think peace is our very nature. So peace is our very nature. And we don't need to do anything to cultivate peace, but we need to do something to manage our negative emotions. Things that take us away from our nature, right? So, for example, we become angry, frustrated, sad, jealous. All these emotions or state of mind takes us away from the nature we have, which is peace. So, for example, I'm sure, whenever we become frustrated or angry or jealous or all these negative emotions, do we enjoy in those state of mind? Do we say, wow, today I became angry? No. What do we do when we have that anger? We say, guys, leave me alone. I'm not feeling well today. Because we want to go back to that nature, the nature of peace, calmness, happiness, contentment, right? So that's a clue that peace is your nature. That's why when you are not in your nature, you don't feel good.
And is that why you set up Cities for Peace? What is the vision there? And I'm hearing that.
So that's where, whenever we are in the grip of the negative emotion, some people know how to cope with it. Some people don't know how to cope with it. And so that is where violence begins. So violence begins when you are not able to manage your negative emotion. Right? So either you will be violent towards yourself. So you might say, hey, I'm not a good guy, or, I don't know, I don't feel good about myself. So this is the source of depression and anxiety, is being violent towards yourself at the level of the thought, right?
Yeah, and being aware of that, Mandar, because often we are violent with ourselves and very critical, and we're not aware of it.
We are not aware of it. And the second way, when you are in the grip of the negative emotion, is you are angry at somebody else. So you speak bad words or you do some bad things. So if you look at violence, most of the violence is actually curable. Right? Most of the violence, I'm not saying all of the violence. So most of the violence is curable if you treat it as a public health issue. It's a health and well-being issue. And that is where we need to provide access to mental wellness solutions as early as possible in our education systems.
Absolutely.
So that a child knows what to do when they are angry, what to do when they are frustrated, what to do when somebody has blamed them.
Yeah.
This access to this knowledge of dealing with the mind is where I felt peace begins. Right? And then the second step is, how do you bring that peace in action?
Yeah, because you've done some incredible work around violence with gangs and the police and, societal level organizations that are dealing with violence all the time, both internal violence, but also violence in external systems. And violence is radical, isn't it? It's a radical thing. And what does a radical wellness solution look like, Mandar? Because often it's seen as fluffy stuff. And if somebody said to me, oh, if you breathe properly, that, it will eradicate violence. If you meditate, it will eradicate violence. Clearly, I believe it can. But how do you get people into that space of actually taking that on board?
Yeah, so I think it's any change maker's dilemma is not everybody will come on board with you if you have a different idea, right?
Yeah, of course.
So first is you find your allies. First, you find people who like you, who trust you, who are willing to give you the space to try something. And that for me was the Los Angeles Assistant Chief of Police.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the business of violence, so I was looking at one homicide happening in the city of Los Angeles, and all the dominoes that need to, fall in place. If you calculate the cost of all these actions that happen after a murder, like you need to put sergeant detectives to find the murderer, book them in jail, the prison time, the jury time. It comes to about $1 million per homicide.
Wow.
And there are roughly 400 homicides, roughly, plus minus.
So there's your business case.
So that's a huge business case. Like you're spending money on violence. So that was my proposal. And it was, it could have been like brushed away, but this man was interested in reducing violence because, when violence happens, it affects everybody. It's not just in that community. Violence today happens anywhere. It happens anytime. It can happen in my neighborhood school.
Yeah.
And so this person was, looking for new ways of dealing with the violence and the trauma associated with it. So that is where the first project of Cities for Peace came about. Is we brought seemingly different people, stakeholders like gang members, victims of gang violence, and the police officers. They usually don't hang out with each other, right?
No, clearly. Yeah.
So that is where we felt, hey, let's bring everybody together and let's go through a boot camp on trauma and well-being. Because when you are in any violent situation or neighborhood, everybody there is traumatized.
Yeah.
And so that is where the first project of the Cities for Peace venture started, is looking at gang violence and transforming the gang leader into becoming an ambassador of peace. Because, those gang leaders, they have a lot of influence. They're also a leader.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
but giving them a vision of peace and well-being for their own community, for their own neighborhoods, is when they latch on to that vision and they then become the ambassador of peace. That is how we feel violence will reduce, is when influential leaders start re-looking at what is missing in their neighborhoods. What is leading to violence in the first place? And when you look at it, it's not very difficult. It is, access to well-being is missing. Access to good food is missing. Access to education is missing. Financial solutions is missing. So because they don't have this, they get into drugs and selling of the drugs, and then crime, and all this starts happening. So that was, where I felt like the police chief of Los Angeles was actually the visionary leader who trusted my solution. And that's very important, for your own growth, is how much time is a leader putting for trying out new things, right? So that is where we need to learn that not everything will be perfect on day one, right?
No, which is the innovation mindset, isn't it?
a leader needs to know that ideas will be imperfect. So we need to deal with it in a different space. Like, for example, we all have trash in our homes, and we put a trash bin. We decorate a nice trash bin and we put that trash in that trash bin every day. But we dump it out once every day or once every week. So similarly, in our mind, we should have some space for imperfection. And that is where you can say it differentiates you from a good leader and an average leader. Is how many times are you allowing people to try new things? Because the world is in need of radical solutions, right? We talked about radical violence. That violence doesn't have to be gang violence or street violence or gun violence. It could even be violence that emanates in your own homes.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yep.
And that is where we have to allow ourselves for that time out. That especially now with the pandemic.
Yep.
We have no idea who has gone through what trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we
so
need
that's where a leader needs to assume that my people, my staff, let me not wait for them to ask for, I need a timeout, I'm not feeling well. Let's assume everybody needs wellness and let's bring that wellness solution as part of our team meetings.
Yeah, and if I go back to team meetings and checklists, let's make it on the top of every checklist. How are my people feeling? How am I feeling? How are they checking in? Because there is a certain amount of anticipation that can be had intentionally, isn't there, by putting this type of solution into developmental practice, whether that be in your home or in your society or community, or we're talking here about teams in your organization. But what was their first reaction, these leaders, to you suggesting a radically different solution, Mandar? And what's your biggest learning there about taking somebody from one polar opposite to the other?
Actually, again, I lucked out because the people that I met with the gang leader of the Bloods gang. When I was walking on the streets of LA, I was told that, hey, this is the leader. If you influence him, then you can work in that neighborhood. So I just took him for 5 minutes and I trained him in one of the exercises that we teach that you also know.
Oh, yes, the breathing exercise. Yeah.
And this man, 25 years in prison, very big, 6 foot macho man, did this exercise with me. And after 3 rounds of this exercise, he opened his eyes and he said, this was good. And I said, Andre, try this for 5 days on your own. If you like it, I will buy you some Indian food. We will go for a nice Indian meal. So that's what I did to engage people, is you give them a taste of inner well-being, inner peace, and create a pull. Because, inner peace, we assume, we take it for granted. Based on outer behaviors, we feel that this person is inner peace and happy. But that is where we are mistaken. Outer happiness or whatever expression of doesn't mean anything in today's world. You have no idea what is the pain point in this person's life.
Yeah, especially because social media, more and more so, are inciting us to look perfect on a screen and to pretend almost that we have a perfect life. It's a conversation I have quite a lot with my son around, you don't have to pretend to be happy. What's important is that you are happy. And that's a very different discussion, isn't it? Because people wear masks all the time, and I understand why they do that. But particularly in tension environments, like more violent environments, they are constantly in this protection defensive mode of just emotionally armoring themselves so that they don't have to step into a space where they don't feel happy.
Yeah, and it's not just about the neighborhoods and the inner cities.
Clearly.
Violence and trauma can be in very good neighborhoods. It could be in very good organizations like Shell. It could be in people in positions like a vice president or a senior vice president, because you have no idea whether that person's family or son or daughter is going through, I don't know, autism spectrum, COVID, depression, drugs. You have no idea.
No, you never know.
That is where we have to create the space. As a leader, our job should be, we need to invest time in our own wellness. Second, we cannot assume that my organization, my team doesn't need it. We should be vulnerable to say, hey, I needed it. This is why I do whatever mental wellness meditation practices you do, so that you invite people to bring their own practice at the workplace.
Yeah, and that you create the conditions.
I will give you an example. 10 years ago, when I was wanting to bring meditation at Shell, I met with the head of sustainable development, and She actually saw what I was doing. I was teaching breathing exercises at Shell, right? And she invited me to her office. She was number 4 in the leadership board, number
Okay.
4 leader, head of sustainable development. And she closed the door and she said, I like what you're doing. And I went through back surgery. I had an option of back surgery or yoga. I took yoga and I avoided back surgery, she said. And so she showed me her yoga mat in the headquarters, in the office room. And she said, wherever I travel, my yoga mat travels with me. Okay. My response to her was, will you be open to sharing this to all your staff? Because she has not shared that to her staff. And so that is where we have to begin. We have to look at our own well-being and natural ways of well-being. Yoga, meditation, like the world is now doing it. It's not 10 years ago. It's now 2023. Everybody is doing it. There are apps. There are so many people doing neuroscience research. We have to try that out as a leader for our own fatigue management or whatever energy management. But that's not enough. The second thing a leader needs to do is create the space where he or she needs to make herself vulnerable and invite people to manage their own wellness.
Yeah, and creating the permission in an organizational context. Yeah.
Even deeper is what we did at Shell. Integrate wellness as part of a learning program on innovation.
Yeah, and as part of leadership development programs and innovation programs and everything to do with creating the conditions, which I think is a leader's job, for the teams and organization to thrive. And therefore for business to thrive.
You know what I mean? Like I feel like safety, like you worked at Airbus, safety is given such a big deal in the Shells of the world and the Boeings and the Airbuses of the world.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So we had this culture at Shell where you had to hold the handrail whenever you were walking down the stairs.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we can give such a big deal to the physical participation in a wellness safety culture, why not the mental aspect of wellness in maintaining higher alertness to create the behavioral safety? You know what I mean? Like you may be walking with a hand on the handrail, but your mind may not be there. Your mind may be stuck on some negative incident that is bugging you.
Yeah.
So this aspect of inner peace, inner wellness, if you associate a cost of not doing it, then there is a huge cost if there is a fatality, if there is a accidental, mistake. Then the cost of not being self-aware, not being behaviorally present, is stacks up to a whole lot. So you might as well inject some of this training as part of the safety training programs, is what I was doing at Shell.
Yes, exactly. And that's also what they're doing in Airbus in terms of looking at, freeing, in inverted commas, this emotional layer of culture. And therefore the mental and almost spiritual well-being of the people who work in the organization. Because I think leaders and change makers very often ignore their own health and mental well-being for the collective good of what they're doing. Or that's my observation. What are your thoughts around that, Mandar? And what recommendations would you have from everything you've done for those leaders and change makers who are so passionate about what they do that they're completely stepping over their own needs?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot because it could be not just a business leader, it could be also a community activist or a social activist. Their whole body, mind complex and spirit is involved in helping other people. Right? So that same thing may be true for a passionate leader who's passionate about his organization. Is 24/7, they are focused on how to make their organization better and whatever rankings and all that is great, but it should not be at a cost of your own wellness, because if you lose that inner wellness factor, then that shows up in your own health. Stress-related ailments show up. And more importantly, it shows up in your family and relationships. Right? So, for example, you may be the CEO at a young age, you have achieved amazing things at a young age. That also means you have a small family that you are raising. And imagine the misery of not spending enough time with your kid while growing up. Why? Because you wanted to put all your attention on building your organization.
Yeah.
Now you may not realize it, but 20 years later, when the kid will say, "Hey, I don't know my dad. My dad was never at home." Right? So that is where it will bite us at the end. On a well-being, personal wellness front, like you might have stress-related ailments, and then you will discover that, oh my God, I should have integrated a healthy lifestyle, healthy food. I was busy, but that will pinch you later on, right? So that is where today we need to have a balance.
And I think the busyness thing is the myth of, what busyness brings to you. I mean, you at the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about what I did during COVID for my family and my sort of friends and also my clients. But I think I really had time to think deeply about what legacy I want to leave as an individual leader, Mandar, but also, my quest to create more human-centered systems, whether that's in an organization or in communities or in my family. And I think that's really shifted two things for me. One, my practice on mental health and well-being for me, and also how much time I spend in each part of that life, and the fact that one of the backbones of it has to be people thriving. And for people around me to thrive, I need to intentionally be understanding how I thrive and reading the systems that I work in to make sure that I can leverage other people thriving. So I think that was my biggest lesson out of COVID, was to try and anticipate. We don't know the damage yet. We don't know what's happening in people's minds, and we never know what's happening in people's minds, like you say. So, which is why I always say to my son, always be kind. You never know what's happening behind the screen or behind the face, or, So the legacy part, which is what I really resonate with in what you did in Shell, but in Cities for Peace, and what you've been doing in society for, creating peaceful leadership as opposed to sort of command and control, more autocratic leadership. I think the legacy piece for me is huge, and I'd be very interested in your thoughts on the legacy piece coming out of your experiments with the LA Police Department and the gang leaders, and what you did at Shell at an organizational level.
After a certain point of time, we do need to think about, okay, I'm not going to be here for eternity, right? So what am I actually leaving behind is my legacy, right? It's my social footprint. And
I like that. Social footprint.
It doesn't have to be a huge mountain, like the Himalaya words of legacy, right? So that is where there is no need to compare my legacy with other people's legacy.
Absolutely.
And so that is where I feel like you need to be grounded in your own culture, traditions, values, and were you able to create experiences for other people that they will remember? Right? So that is where the personal touch, a leader needs to always make sure that the person that is coming to them with a problem, do they go out of your office feeling contented, feeling happy? Right? I think that is where an average leader and a great leader, that's the difference, is the personal touch. So sometimes people are not interested in your solutions. Sometimes people are just interested in being heard.
Of course.
Right? They know how to figure it out. So what are you doing to empower them to figure it out? Right? So sometimes your legacy, which is a big buzzword, just like purpose, we don't need to worry too much about it. Your actions and your experiences that you create for other people will carry the story forward. Like, you don't need to put too much effort into thinking, what should be my legacy? What should be my purpose? Am I doing my purpose? Because sometimes purpose, like you have also said, it's not a destination, right? It's a journey. And in that journey, there are detours, there are timeouts, there is a food court you stop and you eat. So it's all these things add to discovering yourself, discovering your purpose, discovering your legacy also.
And I think we're back to the power of presence, aren't we? Being present in the present moment to who you are and to who you're with. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you help leaders and people become present, Mandar?
Again, this is a big buzzword. So presence, presence, presence. There are books written about it. But the way I explain it is, when you stand on the street, okay, you're standing on the street and traffic is moving on the street. You are awake, your eyes are open, you are hearing the sounds. But what is the prerequisite for you to say traffic is moving on the street? And that prerequisite is that you are not moving with respect to the traffic. You are stationary, and only when there is something stationary, it's able to detect the change. Right? So it's physics 101, that if you detect change, that means relative motion, there needs to be something that is stationary. Does that make sense?
It does make sense completely, yeah. And I like this, how simple that analogy is.
If two cars are moving at the same speed and you look outside, there is no relative motion, so you will feel that nothing's moving. So to detect change, you need a reference point that is not moving. This is the Einstein 101, theory of relativity. Right? 101, basic physics. So now in our own life, have we observed that our body has changed over time? Yes. Do you observe that your thoughts change? Yes. Your feelings change? Yes. That means there is something in you that is not changing. It is observing the change. And it is telling you, yes, my thoughts changed. Yes, I was not feeling well yesterday. Today I'm feeling good. This word, this unchanging aspect of your own existence, you can label that word as consciousness, presence, self, energy, force, whatever you believe and you call it, right? So that presence is part of you. You are having it all the time. So it's not like, oh, you need to do something to be present.
No, of course.
Right? So that awareness, you can even call it awareness. You can even refer to it as a witness. It is witnessing. That consciousness is always alive. All you have to do is put the seeds, water, sunlight, so that that conscious aspect of you is alert more and more and more. That is what is meant by self-awareness. Presence is your actions are self-aware. What does it mean? It comes out of that witness of, hey, this is what I'm doing. Otherwise, we become a victim and a slave of the emotions. Somebody speaks bad to you, you feel, I'm not feeling well because she said bad to me.
Yeah, when it's being intentional, isn't it? About noticing your own system.
That consciousness, which shrinks when somebody blames you, you become angry. Something in you feels shrunk. At the same time, somebody praises you, that same consciousness flowers. Like, feels so good. She praised me. This study of this, what shrinks and what blossoms, that study is more important for a leader. That consciousness, that is again the witness, spending time with that witness is meditation practice. So that is where, whenever you are doing breathing exercises, it's the gap between the exercise or at the end of the exercise where you are just present. And the more time you spend in that presence, the more healed you become, the more wise you become, the more compassionate you become. Because the nature of the presence, consciousness, is love, is compassion, is awareness, is beauty, right? So that is what we need to do every day as a daily habit, just like you brush your teeth every day. You need to be more and more present, observing yourself for 5 minutes, 10 minutes as you go ahead, maybe 20 minutes a day. That is what is recommended for you to recalibrate.
And it's interesting because, of course, before the show we were chatting and you gave me a breathing exercise and said, why don't you do that for 10 days before the show, which I did. And it's exactly that. And there's lots of different things I could say about that exercise in terms of how I didn't feel my arms at all after 3 or 4 times, and it just became habit. But it felt very different when my mind just tuned in and sat with the silence that was created. So I stopped counting, Mandar, 15 counts, wait for this, wait for that. I just did what I felt was what I needed to do. And then I started to sit for longer and longer periods of time without noticing it. I only noticed it when I opened my eyes again and thought, oh, that's 15 minutes. And it's quite hard for me. Or should I say, I have a narrative that tells me it's quite hard for me to sit for 15 minutes and meditate. My meditation practice doesn't go over 20 minutes because I just get distracted. So I was thinking, what's happening here? And it is that calm silence. I come back to your thing around silence is the mother of creativity, because I've had some great ideas during my sort of 5 or 10 minute silence afterwards. And it's like my intuition is popping in to say, hi, what about this? What about that? So that was my experience of your breathing exercise. Of course, I do yoga and I do Pilates, but I was very intentional about this. And I think that's the difference. I was really intentional about stepping back from it and just, you said to me, notice what you notice and don't try and figure it out, which, my go-to is to figure things out. So it was really interesting. So that was my experience of the breathing exercise that I did for 10 days. And after 3 days, it became something very different.
And the more you do it, the more it will flower. So just allow that flowering to happen. Don't sit there thinking, you know what, I'm going to get more intuitive ideas. Right? That's sitting with some intention, right? Drop the intention. And just allow yourself to be in that space where you are open. Whatever that consciousness is going to bring to you is what is meant for you that day.
Exactly, without having to write things down. And it's a very liberating feeling.
It's a very liberating feeling. Otherwise, it will become a lot of pressure. Like, yesterday I got so many good ideas. Today I didn't get anything. Why do you want everything every day? Like, so you allow yourself to be natural, to be free. And if you like it, go deeper. I teach once a month. So this is what I think, I don't know why we didn't learn it while we were growing up in school, colleges, because we do go through lots of anxiety, breakups, failures, and, social friends or mentors, they tell us, it's okay, time will pass, it will heal. But the person who's going through this is suffering. Right? So these exercises, this knowledge of healing and meditation and consciousness allows you to heal more effectively. Obviously, yes, time will heal things, that we all know. But during the time where the impression, the negativity is happening to that person, there is a possibility that that person may go into smoking or drugs or alcohol or take revenge on other people, right? So that is where, through the work that we are doing now, through the Cities for Peace program, we are trying to influence leaders, both of the business world and the civic world, that don't ignore the role of peace and inner peace in the mindset of becoming more prosperous. Right? So more companies will invest in prosperity, like economic development. But peace and prosperity go together.
Of course.
And so that is my request to whoever is watching this show is look at your own purpose, individual purpose, organizational purpose, and look at ways of what else can you do? What else can your organization do that solves problems, allows employees to come forward with ideas, and prosperity definitely is important. But peace and prosperity go hand in hand. One without the other is incomplete.
I'm going to leave our listeners with that, because I was going to ask you for if you had a final call to action, and you've just given it without me asking. So peace and prosperity go hand in hand. Mandar, thank you so much for coming and sharing your stories and your expertise and your insights. Where can people find out more about you, about Cities for Peace, and about what you do?
Well, my website is mandarapte.net
Mm-hmm.
and cities, the number four, peace.org.
Okay, super. And I will put that in the show notes so that people can go directly to that. Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Looking
Thanks.
forward to our association
Yeah,
collaboration and friendship.
likely. Yes, me too. Thanks for a great conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful job, Susie.
Bye.